The rain fell softly over Seattle that night, wrapping the city in silver mist. Inside a quiet cafe on the corner of Pine Street, Amelia sat by the window, stirring her cold hot chocolate without tasting it. She came there often after work, pretending she liked the calm. But tonight, the calm felt heavy. Her eyes wandered to the window where raindrops slid down the glass, tracing paths that disappeared before they reached the edge, like promises never kept. She didn't know why her chest felt tight, only that something about the night felt different. Like the air was holding its breath. When the cafe door opened, the soft bell above it chimed. A rush of cold air swept in, followed by the sound of shoes on the wet floor. She glanced up and froze. It was Ethan Cole, the man she had loved once. The one she had promised to forget. The one who had left anyway. He looked older, maybe a little tired. But his eyes still had that warmth she used to trust too easily. Ethan scanned the room. And when his gaze landed on her, his expression shifted from surprise to something deeper recognition. Regret, and something like relief. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he walked toward her. Amelia's heart started pounding, but she didn't look away. When he reached her table, he smiled lightly. It's the same half-smile that used to make her feel seen. "Still can't handle black coffee, huh?" he said, nodding toward her drink. She blinked, trying to steady her breath. "And you still remember everything?" she replied. Ethan chuckled softly and pulled out the chair across from her. "May I?" he asked, and she only nodded. It felt strange to people sitting across from each other after years apart, surrounded by the smell of coffee and rain. But the strangeness faded quickly. Their words started to flow, first awkward, then gentle, as if the years between them had been a long pause instead of an ending. They talked about simple things at first: work, friends, the city, how it hadn't really changed. But then the conversation deepened without warning. She found herself asking the questions she had buried for years. "Why did you go, Ethan? You just disappeared." He looked down at his hands. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Things were falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix them. I thought leaving would help both of us." "It didn't," she said softly. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I begged you not to stop trying. I begged you not to walk away." He sighed and met her eyes. "I know, and maybe I didn't stop. Maybe I just lost my way trying to come back." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to be angry, but instead she felt the ache of something familiar: hope. A dangerous kind of hope that came alive to Asuli when it came to him. She tried to ignore it for a while. They sat quietly, listening to the rain outside. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice softer this time. "You look good, Amelia. Happier, maybe." She smiled faintly. "Some days I am. Some days I pretend." He nodded slowly, understanding more than her words could say. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things left unsaid, memories, what-ifs, unfinished sentences. She realized how much she had missed that just being near someone who understood without explanations. When the clock on the wall struck 9, Ethan checked his watch. "I should probably go," he said. He stood up, hesitating, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Amelia rose, unsure what to do with the sudden space between them. "It was good to see you," she said, her voice softer than she intended. He gave a small nod. "You too." He paused, then smiled again. That familiar smile that used to melt her walls. "Maybe I'll see you around." She nodded, even though she wasn't sure if she wanted to. "Maybe." He turned to leave, and for a moment she watched his reflection in the cafe window, the man she once loved, walking away again. But this time, something inside her shifted. Before he reached the door, she whispered almost under her breath, "I begged you to never stop." "And you did." Ethan froze. Slowly, he turned back. The look on his face was unreadable, a mix of guilt and something that looked almost like pain. He walked back a step closer and said quietly, "Maybe I never really did." Amelia's breath caught. She wanted to ask what he meant, but he was already gone, disappearing into the rain like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of outside. The city lights blurred through the raindrops on the glass. She sat back down, her heart heavy and confused. The warmth of their brief connection still lingered, but so did the ache of everything unfinished. She didn't know if seeing him again was fate, coincidence, or a cruel reminder of what once was, as she gathered her things to leave. She noticed something on the table, a small napkin with his handwriting. Just 3 words, "Don't stop believing." Amelia smiled faintly, shaking her head. It was such a him thing to do, leaving something that felt like both a goodbye and a beginning. She slipped the napkin into her coat pocket and stepped outside. The rain was cold, but she didn't run for cover. She walked slowly, letting it fall against her skin, washing away the confusion, the anger, the years of silence. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive, not because she had answers, but because she finally cared to ask the questions again. That night, as she reached her apartment and looked back at the city glowing beneath the rain, Amelia realized that sometimes love doesn't end, it just pauses, waiting for the right moment to breathe again. And though she tried to convince herself that it was just a chance encounter, deep down she knew the truth. The universe doesn't bring back the same person twice unless there's something left. It's unfinished. She went to bed that night with her heart restless but strangely calm, replaying his voice in her mind. Maybe I never really did. Those words followed her into sleep like a quiet promise. One she wasn't sure she wanted to believe, but couldn't forget either. Outside, the rain continued to fall, soft and steady, as if the city itself was whispering that some stories, no matter how far they drift apart, always find a way to begin again. The days after that night passed slowly. Yet Amelia couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped with the quiet hope that it might be him. But it wasn't. Not at first. Life went on, the same quiet mornings, the same bus ride to work, the same view of the cloudy Seattle sky, but everything felt slightly different. As if a door she had closed years ago had creaked open again. Then one evening, while she was finishing a report at her small desk, her phone lit up with a message. "Ethan, still up for coffee?" Her fingers hovered above the screen. Her mind told her to stay away, but her heart pressed yes before she could think twice. They met at the same cafe 2 days later. When she walked in, Ethan was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee in front of him, one black, one with extra cream, just how she liked it. He smiled when he saw her, and she felt that familiar warmth again, the one she had tried to bury for years. "Still can't handle the strong stuff," he teased softly, sliding the lighter cup toward her. "Still trying to fix me." She replied with a small laugh. They talked for hours as if time didn't exist. This time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. He told her about his last few years, how he had gone to New York, chasing a promotion that never came, how his relationship there had fallen apart, and how he realized that success meant nothing if you were alone at the top. Amelia listened quietly. She didn't say much, but her silence carried understanding. She knew what loneliness felt like. Over the next few weeks, coffee became dinner, and dinner became long walks along the waterfront. They didn't label anything, but something was growing again softly, carefully. They laughed easily, remembered old jokes, and even argued playfully about the small things. It felt like coming home to something that had been waiting for them all along. One evening, as they walked by Lake Union, the sunset painted the water gold. Ethan stopped, staring out at the horizon. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to come here alone when I was younger. I'd sit by the lake and imagine what life would look like if I hadn't messed things up." Amelia looked at him, her expression tender but guarded. "You didn't mess everything up," she said. "We were both young. We thought love could survive anything." He turned toward her, eyes searching hers. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I think love can survive, if both people want it to." Ethan nodded slowly. "I do," he said, his voice steady. "I never stopped wanting it." Her heart trembled at his words, but she didn't know what to say. So she just smiled and looked away, watching the sunlight fade. After that evening, something changed. They didn't talk about getting back together, but the distance between them was gone. He started showing up at her office sometimes, waiting outside with a coffee in hand. He'd help her carry groceries, fix the broken lamp in her apartment, and make her laugh when the day felt too heavy. He didn't push. He was just there. And that somehow meant everything. Still, Amelia couldn't stop wondering if this was temporary, if he would one day vanish again, leaving her to pick up the pieces like before. One rainy afternoon, she asked him directly, "Ethan, why now?" After all this time, he looked surprised but didn't avoid the question. "Because I finally learned what matters," he said simply. "I thought running away from pain would make it disappear. But I was wrong. I carried it with me everywhere. And no matter where I went, it always led me back to you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. "People change," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "That's why I came back. I want to show you that, this time, I won't stop trying." His words sank deep into her heart. She didn't respond right away, but she didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. From that day on, their connection grew deeper. They didn't rush. They didn't make promises. They simply lived one day at a time, learning each other all over again. Ethan would sometimes leave little notes for her small things, like "good luck today" or "don't forget to smile." It was simple, but it warmed her every time. Yet even with the quiet happiness that surrounded them, there was still something uncertain hanging in the air. Sometimes she'd catch him staring off into the distance, lost in thought. When she asked what was wrong, he'd smile and say nothing, but his eyes told another story. One night, as they sat on a bench overlooking the city lights, Amelia leaned closer and whispered, "You look like you're somewhere else." Ethan sighed. "There's something I need to fix before I can stay for good," he said. "Something I left unfinished back in New York." She felt a cold wave rush through her chest. "Are you leaving again?" He turned toward her, eyes full of emotion. "Not like before. I just need to close that chapter. But I promise I'll come back." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I want to believe you." He took her hand gently. "Then do. Because when you begged me not to stop all those years ago, I just didn't know how to make my way back. But I do now." The words struck deep. They weren't dramatic, but they carried the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they still had left that night. After he dropped her home, Amelia couldn't sleep. She stood by the window watching the rain, thinking about the way he looked at her, the softness in his voice, and the quiet promise behind his words. She wanted to be brave enough to hope again, but part of her was still afraid of the heartbreak she'd barely survived once before. The next morning, she found a small envelope under her door. Inside was a handwritten note. "Don't give up on me. I'm coming back." Her fingers trembled as she read it. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost completely: faith. Weeks later, they met again before he left. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "It's not goodbye. Just wait for me, okay?" Amelia didn't say anything. She simply nodded, her face pressed against his shoulder. When he walked away, she stood there watching him disappear into the rain once more. But this time, it felt different. This time, his promise didn't feel like words, it felt real as the night fell. She whispered to herself, "Please don't stop this time, Ethan." And somewhere in her heart, she knew he wouldn't. The first few weeks after Ethan left for New York were strange for Amelia. The city felt quieter, her days longer. Every morning she'd make 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then smile sadly and pour one down the sink. She told herself to focus on work, on friends, on life. But her heart wasn't listening. Every text he sent became the highlight of her day. He'd message her pictures of sunsets from his apartment window or small updates about his job search, always ending with the same line, "I miss you more than I should." They talked every night, sometimes for hours. Their calls started lighthearted, sharing stories, laughing about old memories, but slowly turned deeper. They spoke about their fears, their past mistakes, and how hard it was to love someone from afar. Ethan confessed that being away from her again was harder than he'd expected. "It feels like I'm living half a life," He said one night, his voice tired through the static. Amelia didn't know what to say, so she just whispered, "Come home soon." But as weeks turned into months, the distance started to change things. Calls became shorter, replies slower. Some days, he'd sound distracted. Other days, she could hear stress in his voice. "I'm just trying to settle everything here," he'd say whenever she asked. "I want things to be right when I come back." She tried to trust him. She really did. But late at night, when her apartment felt too quiet, she wondered if promises could fade the way voices do over long-distance calls. One evening, Amelia sat on the same bench by Lake Union where they'd once watched the sunset together. The air was cold, the water still. She opened her phone and scrolled through their message, his words, his photos, his jokes. Then she noticed something. It had been 3 days since his last text. She tried calling, but it went to voicemail. Her heart dropped, not because she was angry, but because the silence reminded her too much of the first time he left. The next morning, he finally called. His voice sounded off-tired, distant. "Hey, sorry. Things have been rough," he said. "Work's been insane. I'm trying to fix something before I come back." Amelia swallowed her frustration. "I get it," she said softly. "Just don't disappear again." "I won't," he promised. But his tone didn't sound convincing. Days went by, then weeks. She started living in small moments, checking her phone, reading his old notes, walking the same paths they once shared. Life moved on, but her heart was stuck somewhere between hope and heartbreak. Then, one Friday evening, when she least expected it, there was a knock at her door. She opened it, and there he was. Ethan stood in the hallway, holding a small suitcase, his eyes tired but full of warmth. "Surprise," he said with a weak smile. Amelia froze for a moment, then threw her arms around him. She didn't care about explanations. She just needed to know he was real again. When she finally pulled away, she noticed how different he looked. His beard was longer, his eyes heavier. "You look exhausted," she said. He laughed lightly. "New York does that to you, but I'm here now." For the next few days, everything felt perfect again. They cooked dinner together, watched old movies, talked until late at night. He told her about his time in New York, the pressure, the mistakes, the regret. She listened, feeling the walls around her heart start to crumble. He was here, and that was enough. But even in those peaceful moments, Amelia sensed something was wrong. Sometimes she'd find him staring out the window, lost in thought. Other times, his phone would buzz, and he'd silence it quickly. She didn't want to be suspicious, but the unease grew stronger every day. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, she asked quietly, "Is everything okay, Ethan? You seem somewhere else." He froze, the plate in his hand slipping slightly. "It's nothing," he said quickly. "Just a few things left to settle from work. Are you going back?" She asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "Maybe for a little while. I didn't plan to tell you like this." Her heart sank. "You just got here." "I know," he said. "But if I don't finish what I started, it'll always hang over us." She turned away, blinking back tears. "You always have a reason to leave, Ethan." He reached for her hand. "And I always come back," he said quietly. But Amelia wasn't sure if love could survive another goodbye. That night, they sat on the couch in silence. The movie played, but neither of them watched it. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. "You once said you begged me not to stop," he said softly. "You were right. I shouldn't have. This time, I'm asking you to believe me. I'm doing this so I can finally stay." Her voice trembled. "I want to believe you." He brushed his thumb across her hand. "Then believe." 2 days later, he packed again. She watched from the doorway, trying to memorize the way he looked under the morning light. He promised to call every day to keep her updated, to be back before the next season. When he leaned in to kiss her forehead, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "don't stop this time." "I won't," he said, his voice steady but his eyes full of emotion. "Not now. Not ever." Then he was gone. Weeks turned into months again. True to his word, he called often at first. But slowly, the pattern repeated: fewer messages, shorter talks, more distance. Yet this time, Amelia didn't panic. She had changed. She had learned that love wasn't about holding someone tight. It was about trusting that they'd come back. Still, there were nights when she'd sit by her window, staring at the rain, feeling the ache of missing him. She wondered what he was doing if he thought of her the way she thought of him. Then one evening, to receive a letter, actual handwritten letter, not a text. It was short but full of emotion. "I'm finishing things here. It's harder than I expected, but I'm not giving up. You told me once to never stop and I haven't. I'm coming back, Amelia. Just wait a little longer." Her eyes filled with tears as she read it. She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the napkin he'd left months ago, the one that said, "Don't stop believing." In that moment, she realized something. Love wasn't about constant presence. It was about quiet persistence, about showing up again and again, even when the world tried to pull you apart. That night, as the rain returned to Seattle, Amelia sat by the window, watching the lights reflect off the wet streets. She whispered softly to the night, "Come back soon, Ethan." And though miles separated them, she knew somewhere, under the same sky, he was whispering back, "I never stopped." Winter came and went, and Amelia's life quietly moved forward. The rain gave way to soft spring mornings, and Seattle's streets began to bloom with color again. Yet deep inside, she still carried that familiar Ica space that only Ethan could fill. His last letter stayed pinned to her fridge. The ink slightly smudged from where her fingers had traced the words too many times. He still called occasionally, always sounding busy but hopeful. "I'm almost done here," he'd say. "Just a few more weeks." She wanted to believe it, but she had learned not to hang her happiness on promises. One bright morning, Amelia stood in her apartment watering the plants by her window. She was finally learning how to live without waiting. She had joined a local art class, started hiking again, and spent more time with her sister. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. And then, without warning, everything shifted. That afternoon, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. When she answered, Ethan's voice came through, breathless and warm. "I'm back," he said simply. "Can I see you?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then her heart caught up with her words. Now, he said, an hour later, there was a knock at her door. She hesitated before opening it, afraid to hope too much, but when she did, her breath left her completely. Ethan stood there holding a bouquet of white lilies, rain dripping from his hair and shoulders. His smile was soft, nervous, real. "I told you," he said, his voice steady. "I never stopped." Amelia didn't move at first. She just stared, trying to believe that he was actually there. Then tears filled her eyes as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The scent of rain and lilies filled the air, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. When they finally sat down, Ethan told her everything. He had gone back to New York to close his business for good, to settle debts, to walk away from the life that had once taken him from her. "It took longer than I thought," he said. "But every day, every single day, I thought about coming home." Amelia listened quietly, her hand resting on his. There was no anger left in her, only understanding. "You really came back," she whispered. "I told you I would," he said, smiling faintly. "This time, for good." They talked for hours that day about everything and nothing. About how they'd changed, how the years apart had taught them to value what truly mattered. It wasn't like before. It was quieter, gentler, more real. They didn't need grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Just being in the same room felt enough. That evening, they took a walk through the city. The streets glowed under the golden light of the setting sun. Every corner, every turn carried memories of who they used to be. When they reached the lake, the same spot where they had once sat years ago, Ethan stopped and turned to her. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" he asked. She nodded, smiling. "You told me you could sit here forever if I was beside you." He chuckled softly. "I guess I finally get to prove it." They sat down on the bench, the one that had seen their laughter, their tears, their goodbyes. This time there was no sadness, only peace. As the sun disappeared behind the skyline, Ethan took her hand and said quietly, "I don't have any more promises to make, Amelia. I just have today and every day after this, if you'll let me stay." Amelia looked at him for a long moment. She thought about everything, the heartbreak, the waiting, the lonely nights, the hope that refused to die. Then she smiled through her tears. "You don't need to promise anything anymore. Just don't stop being here." He nodded. Never again. That night, they cooked dinner together in her small kitchen. It wasn't perfect. He burned the pasta. She spilled sauce on her shirt, but it was theirs. Between laughter and music playing softly in the background, they found what they had been missing all along, not the passion of the past, but the calm of something real. Later, as the rain began to fall outside, Ethan stood by the window looking out at the city lights. "You know," he said, "it's funny. I used to think love was supposed to be dramatic big moments, big risks. But it's this, isn't it? Just choosing each other again and again." Amelia joined him,